Welcome back to Corner Stories. I got involved with a man and now that person keeps trying to sabotage my family and other relationships. I, 41M, had been struggling after breaking up with my longtime partner, 40F. She wanted to use our money for trips, adventures, etc. I've always been a bit of a stick in the mud, wanting to save and invest so we can retire early and enjoy life and still support our son, 14M, with his future studies. We usually found a compromise that would make her happy and keep us on track financially. i.e., a week in Croatia instead of Spain. The last compromise was her going on a trip with a friend, 37F, of hers I know well that had some sort of deal with an airline for inexpensive flights and hotels. She showed me the trip itinerary before discount and it was a full-on luxury situation. I trusted her that her friend was going to save 75% due to their status or relationship with an airline. I dropped them off at the airport and she was super excited and kissed me before she left. She called me 2 days later and told me we need to talk. While I'm not exactly clear what happened on the trip, she met some very well-to-do gentleman and has more or less shacked up with him. As I understand, he is a bit older than her and has money. She isn't going to return anytime soon and we're finished as far as she is concerned, but she will be back for her possessions. In addition, she did not get any sort of discount on the trip as it turns out she withdrew 40K out of our retirement account to pay for it. I found this out because she also took another 100K plus out of the account a couple days ago and I received a call from my bank advisor to advise me on some options regarding lessening the penalty. Needless to say, I was surprised. X has blocked me on everything. Her family has blocked me after sending me some milquetoast goodbye messages. She and her family are still in contact with my son and have told them while I'm not bad, his mom deserves a more exciting life. I would say he has not been particularly supportive, though as the child I don't expect him to boost me up. But it would be nice to get a hug maybe, or some affirmation. It does hurt when he tells me how excited he is to go visit her. I'm stuck with the mortgage. Retirement savings are not wiped out, but I did contribute 80% of them and she took far more than she's ever contributed to them. A son who I love, but unknowingly sticks a dagger in my heart every time he talks about his mom. Anyway. About 18 months after my wife left, I was way down in the dumps. I had tried meeting people on apps and did not get very many matches. I even subscribed to the premium functions. I went on a couple dates, but I was awkward and it didn't go the way I would have liked. A colleague of mine told me if I wanted an affirmation I should add men to my dating preferences and I would get lots of matches. We laughed, but that night I did add men to it. My colleague was not wrong. I woke up the next day and had 25 or so potential matches. I smiled and started deleting them, but one gentleman had a very kind face. Super handsome and a certain charm. I wanted to talk to him, but not romantically. He just looked like a dude I wanted to hang out with. I paired with him John, 35M, I told him as much in the chat. I told him about not seeing him as a romantic partner, but he looked like a cool dude to hang out with. He seemed open to that and we agreed to meet for a beer at a local brewery. We had a few beers and he was a cool dude. Super interesting with funny stories and he made me feel cool. We shook hands and agreed to meet the following week. We met a few weeks in a row. We called it being the brewery buddies. It was the only part of my week I looked forward to. I was super depressed the rest of the week save for the day before we met and the day after. After a few weeks he invited me over for a drink at his house. We were both drunk at this point. Long story short, we had sex. I wasn't so drunk I don't remember, I recall just being happy for the contact at the time and he was super gentle and we took it pretty slow. We fell asleep and the next morning we had sex again, it was a lot easier the second time. He was a top for everyone that is looking for the logistics. He is a great guide and really walked me through the process. Getting my first ever enema drunk at 3 a.m. was an experience I honestly look back on and smile. Our weekly brewery meetup became a weekly hookup. Eventually we didn't even go to the brewery. The whole time I told him I wasn't trying to get involved romantically, but if he wanted to be FWB I was down. I'm not typically bisexual or anything, but I really liked the contact and affection. For anyone out there thinking there might be some comeuppance for my wife, there isn't. She and her new partner are living their best life. He isn't some scam artist. He actually has the money he says he does. She looks amazing on her Instagram photos. My son has been to see her a few times and always tells me how amazing it is where they live. It kills me. I honestly wish she would let him live with her so I didn't have to hear that, but she doesn't want him there full time. It was after seeing one of her photos, I gave my head a shake. I decided that I needed to get my life together. At first I thought John and I might actually end up as a couple, but he let me know that he was happy with how things were, and that there was another man in his life. So I went back on the apps, and after a few weeks I had a couple dates and met a nice age-appropriate woman, Jane. We went out a few times, and she was super cool. Not to sound vapid or shallow, but she isn't traditionally attractive, but I fell hard for her. I slept with John once after my first date with Jane, and then I canceled our next few meetups because it didn't feel right sleeping with him and courting her. I told John about Jane and he was not happy for me. He told me he didn't want to share. To which I pushed back as he was fine with seeing multiple men at the same time. He told me it was a comfort thing for him about his partners. I told him we needed to stop meeting then, as I wanted to pursue Jane. He was not happy but asked if we could sleep together one last time, to which I honestly happily did so. We kissed in the morning and he wished me well. I told him how thankful I was for him and we hugged and I cried a bit. I was seeing Jane for the next few weeks and John would text me occasionally but nothing unwelcome or over the line. Then one night I was out with Jane and we saw John with some work friends out in a restaurant. He came up and we side hugged and I introduced him to Jane as my friend. John said to Jane something to the degree of, "He calls me a friend in public, but daddy, when it's just the two of us." Jane laughed nervously and John excused himself and went back to his work friends. Jane was unnerved and asked about John and I. I was honest and told her the truth. She was pale white and shaken. Dinner got awkward and when we parted we didn't kiss as we had previously. The next day she called me and apologized. She said she just wasn't expecting to hear that and was struggling to process it, but she realized she was being silly and she was fine with it. I was relieved. Jane really is the real deal. The next time we slept together I was nervous and struggling a bit with my erection. She made a joke about her not having a dick which completely threw me and I panicked, but she realized I was shook and immediately apologized and said she was just trying to break the tension. Long story short, she ended up using one of her toys on me and we both had a blast. We incorporated it into our sexual repertoire. And then this week rolls around. John messaged me last Saturday and it was a full-on booty call. I showed Jane the message and politely declined the invitation. John sent me another message which was a little more curt. I was firmer with him and suggested we meet in the new year and go back to the being brewery buddies. Last Sunday was not a great day for me. When my son asked me if his mom left because I was gay. I asked why he thought that and he told me John had messaged him on Facebook and told him about us. I was honest that John and I had spent some time together and my son was more accepting than I expected. Everything was more or less fine until a few hours later he showed me another message from John just letting my son know that I was the bottom in the relationship. John did not use that language to describe it. My son was less okay with this and ultimately went to go stay with his mom's parents for a while. He immediately told them about, and now everyone I know has heard the reason my wife left is that I was having a gay affair. I'm not ashamed of what I did, but for Christ's sakes, I never told anyone about my sex life with my wife and no one ever asked. Now everyone is super comfortable asking about how many guys I've slept with. My wife called me to ask me about it and laughed hysterically and apologized. She ended up being far more supportive than almost everyone else, but she teased me about it. She says she knows I was not having an affair and she will ask her parents to stop repeating that. She also called me a bottom bitch. Which made me very mad for all of 3 seconds and then we laughed together. We're likely headed for divorce, but by the sounds of it, apart from the money she took, she doesn't really want anything other than time with our son. That's a relief. I don't have a ton of friends, but I'm getting a bit tired of the whispers at work. Gay people work there too, so people are just excited about the scandal. John of course was not finished. Jane went home on Tuesday. John has messaged her via Facebook and a few people with her last name. One of which was a younger cousin who has been teasing her about me. Her brothers and dad are also giving her a hard time. We were on the phone and one of them said something like, "Hide all the bananas, the homo is going to use his gay telephone sonar and come over here to cram them all up his ass." It seemed like it killed in the room. And granted, I did laugh at it. Jane was upset and told me she will call me later. I'm panicking because I'm worried she won't want to deal with the family dynamic with me if we keep seeing each other. So I'm down in the dumps. Today was a real tough one. I'm at my parents' and planning on staying there all week with my son who has returned from his other grandparents. We were having lunch when my son brought up John, of which my parents did not know. They asked me about it and I confirmed it. My mom seemed unfazed and my dad got super quiet. After lunch we spoke on the deck and he was supportive, but he was a bit shaken. It didn't help my son made sure he knew I was the bottom. My dad is a pretty open guy, but I don't think he was in love with the idea of me being mounted by another man. He was direct and kind about it, but I could tell he was struggling to process it. He told me he loves me no matter what. There were some tears. Later on this afternoon, as I was in my old room wrapping some gifts, when I heard my dad start yelling at my son. Long story short, my son thought it would be funny to wrap up some of his mother's old underwear and give it to me as a present. He told my parents. My dad lost his mind on him for trying to humiliate me. Which, too late for that. My son is now angry in his room. My father is angry in his office and my mom is crying. I'm not ashamed of what I've done, but I am at a very low point right now. My son doesn't respect me. The woman I am crazy about is now on the fence. A friend that I shared what I consider to be special moments with has gone out of his way to make my life a mess, and my mom is crying at Christmas because her grandson and husband are at each other's throats. This Christmas fucking sucks. Relevant comments. Commenter, I don't know where you live, but it might be time for a lawyer, and to tell him if he contacts you or anyone related to you, then you will proceed with a lawyer for harassment. OP's response, I think you might be right. I'm not going to do anything until after the new year, but I just may go that route if it happens again. Commenter, start talking to a lawyer now. OP's response, it's more timing than anything else. The lawyer I would use typically has their office closed until the 3rd. I'm off work till the 7th as well. There is a lot of background here I've glossed over. That money was as much hers as it is mine as far as some legal advice I got some time back. Ultimately it was far less than half of the accounts. My son isn't naive to why she left. He knows. That is all we have so far with this story. It's pretty crushing what OP is going through. I don't know what to say, a lot of it is out of his control, but I can't help but feel his passive approach to life is partly the reason everything has gotten so out of control. Anyway, this is where I leave you. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to connect with each other in the comments below. Until next time, be kind, be curious, and I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, Corner Stories signing off.